Imagine a landmass the size of Europe. It is a continent of wind, ice, and absolute silence, hostile to human life, yet holding the keys to the planet's climate and potentially its economic future. It is the driest, windiest, and coldest place on Earth. Now, imagine that nearly half of that continent, a territory twice the size of the Australian mainland itself, belongs to one nation. That nation is not the United States. It is not Russia. It is not China. It is Australia. Most people look at a map of the world and see Australia as an island continent, isolated in the Pacific. They forget to look down. If you project the borders south, Australia claims sovereignty over 42% of Antarctica. It is known as the Australian Antarctic Territory, AAT. It is a staggering claim, nearly 6 million square kilometers of ice, rock, and strategic coastline. It is the single largest territorial claim on the planet. For a century this claim was respected. It was protected by the Gentleman's Agreement of the Antarctic Treaty system, which froze territorial disputes and banned military activity. The bottom of the world was a sanctuary of peace and science, a place where nations competed with weather balloons, not missiles. But in 2026, the sanctuary is being breached. The silence is being broken by the roar of heavy machinery, the crunch of icebreakers, and the hum of high-powered radar arrays. A new player has entered the game, one that does not care about gentlemen's agreements or historical claims. China has moved into Australia's backyard. And they aren't just visiting. They are building concrete foundations on Australian claimed soil, establishing a permanent footprint that challenges the very concept of Western sovereignty in the South. The ice curtain has fallen, and the battle for the last continent has begun. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are looking at the most overlooked frontline in the global power struggle, the Southern Ocean. The narrative you usually hear about Antarctica involves penguins, melting ice shelves, and climate scientists drilling for core samples to save the world. That is the soft power narrative. It is the comfortable story we tell ourselves. We are here to talk about the hard power reality. We are here to talk about why major powers are spending billions of dollars to build hardened infrastructure in a place where the temperature drops to minus 80 degrees. The thesis for this episode is simple. Antarctica is not a park, it is a geopolitical chessboard. And right now the West is being flanked. While we focus on the first island chain in the north, China is securing the fourth front in the south. We are going to break down the sheer scale of the Australian claim, the dual-use threat of the new Chinese bases, and the terrifying deadline of 2048 that could turn the white continent into a militarized zone. This is the story of how Australia went from being the casual landlord of a frozen empire to the frontline defender of the southern hemisphere. To understand the anger simmering in Canberra, you have to understand the history. Australia's connection to Antarctica isn't just bureaucratic, it is blood and iron. It is woven into the national mythos just like Gallipoli or the Kokoda Track. It goes back to the heroic age of exploration. Men like Douglas Mawson, who man-hauled sleds across thousands of kilometers of blizzard-swept ice in 1911, seeing his companions die, eating his dogs to survive, and crawling back to base alone. Mawson didn't just explore, he claimed. He understood, even in the early 20th century, that proximity equates to destiny. He planted the Union Jack and mapped the coastline not for the sake of cartography, but for the sake of empire. Australia is the gateway to Antarctica. Hobart, in Tasmania, is one of the 5 recognized global gateway cities. It is the launching pad. Because of this geography and history, Australia formally asserted sovereignty over the AAT in 1933. This claim is massive. It covers a sector that includes some of the most accessible and scientifically valuable real estate on the continent. It is an area larger than the entirety of Western Europe. It contains mountain ranges, vast glaciers, and potentially the world's largest untapped mineral deposits. Under the Antarctic Treaty signed in 1959, these claims were frozen. The treaty didn't cancel them, it just said we would stop arguing about them to prevent the Cold War from spreading south. It was a brilliant piece of diplomatic engineering. It demilitarized an entire continent and dedicated it to peace and science. It said, no nukes, no forts, no mining. For 60 years it worked. The US built a base at the South Pole, Amundsen Scott, to assert a presence everywhere. Australia built Casey, Davis, and Mawson stations on the coast to maintain its claim. The Russians built Vostok. Everyone got along because the technology didn't exist to exploit the continent, and the strategic value was low. But the world has changed. Technology has changed. The tyranny of distance that protected Antarctica is gone. Modern nuclear icebreakers, heavy-lift aircraft like the C-17, and satellite communications have made the continent accessible year-round. And with accessibility comes interest. China joined the Antarctic Treaty late in 1983. At the time they were a minor player. They had one small station and no icebreaker. They were humiliated by being made to wait outside the negotiating room while the big boys made decisions. They vowed never to be in that position again. Today the situation is unrecognizable. China describes itself as a near-Antarctic state, a term that has no basis in geography or law, but clearly signals their intent. It is a political construct designed to legitimize their intrusion. They argue that Antarctica belongs to all mankind, which is diplomatic code for "we want our share." They view the Australian claim not as a sovereign right, but as a colonial relic that needs to be dismantled. They see the treaty system not as a shield for nature, but as a club of old powers trying to keep the rising powers out. This is the source of the tension. Australia views itself as the custodian. We wrote the rules. We enforce the environmental protocols. We run the search and rescue zone that covers a quarter of the globe. We see ourselves as the sheriff of the South. China sees Australia as a squatter on land that should be open for business. And they are testing the sheriff's resolve. They are pushing into the AAT, building bases without asking permission, conducting inspections that look a lot like intelligence gathering, and mapping the mineral resources that lie beneath the ice. This is a direct challenge to Australian national pride. It is a trespass. Imagine if a foreign power started building a permanent fortified research station in the middle of the Australian outback without a visa. That is effectively what is happening in the AAT. The problem is the gray zone. Because the treaty bans military activity, every action China takes is cloaked in science. This is the genius of their strategy. You can't shoot at a scientist. You can't blockade a research vessel. If you complain, you look like you are anti-science or anti-cooperation. You look like the aggressor. But in the Chinese system, there is no distinction between civilian and military. By law, the 2017 National Intelligence Law states that all Chinese organizations and citizens must support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work. All Chinese civilian infrastructure must be capable of supporting military operations. This is the doctrine of civil-military fusion. So, when China builds a weather station in the Australian Antarctic Territory, is it checking the wind speed, or is it calibrating the trajectory for ballistic missiles? When they build a satellite ground station to download climate data, is it tracking ice flows, or is it tracking American spy satellites? The answer almost certainly is both. This puts Australia in a bind. We want to uphold the treaty. We want to keep the peace. But we are watching a rival power construct a dual-use network inside our own borders. The map of the AAT is being rewritten. For decades, it was dotted with Australian flags. Now the red flag of the PRC is flying over key strategic points. They have built Zhongshan Station right next to Australia's Davis Station. They have built Taishan Inland. And now they have built the game-changer, Qinling. This isn't just about presence. It's about dominance. It's about creating facts on the ground. China is playing a game of Go, placing stones on the board to encircle the opponent. And while Australia was patting itself on the back for being an Antarctic leader, Beijing was pouring concrete. The 42% claim is only real if you can enforce it. And right now, the enforcement mechanisms of the treaty system are breaking down. The West relies on inspections, sending a team to look at the other guy's base to make sure there are no guns. But recently, China has started restricting access to parts of their bases. They invoke safety concerns or scientific sensitivity. They are creating no-go zones in Antarctica. This is the salami-slicing tactic we see in the South China Sea, transplanted to the South Pole. First you build a shelter. Then you build a helipad. Then you build a dock. Then you install a radar. And suddenly you have a sovereign enclave that the host nation cannot touch. The Australian public is largely unaware of this. They think Antarctica is just a place for documentaries. They don't realize that a quiet invasion is taking place in the territory their grandfathers claimed. The stakes are not just ice. They are sovereignty, security, and the future of the global commons. And Australia is the only nation standing in the breach. The listening station. Let's zoom in on the specific threat that has the Five Eyes intelligence community on high alert. In February 2024, China officially opened the Qinling Station. Located on Inexpressible Island in the Ross Sea, deep within the territory claimed by New Zealand and adjacent to the Australian sector. This isn't a collection of huts. It is a sprawling 5,000 square meter facility. It has a wharf capable of docking icebreakers. It has a massive logistics footprint. It is built to operate year-round, surviving the brutal polar winter. But the most important feature of Qinling isn't the dormitory or the laboratory. It is the array of radomes, the golf ball-shaped structures that house satellite dishes, sitting on the ridge above the station. Why put a satellite station here? Physics. Most Western military intelligence satellites, the keyhole optical satellites, the radar satellites, the electronic eavesdropping birds, orbit the Earth in a polar orbit. They fly north to south, passing over the poles on every rotation. This allows them to cover the entire globe as the Earth spins beneath them. This means that the North Pole and the South Pole are the most valuable real estate in the world for ground stations. If you put a receiver at the South Pole, you can communicate with your satellite on every single orbit. You can download the photos it took over America, upload new targeting instructions, and clear the memory banks 14 times a day. If you don't have a polar station, you have to wait until the satellite passes over your own country. This creates a latency, a delay in intelligence. In modern war, a delay of 20 minutes can be the difference between hitting a carrier and hitting empty water. Qinling Station sits directly under this orbital highway. Western intelligence agencies fear that Qinling is acting as a massive vacuum cleaner. It isn't just controlling Chinese satellites, it is listening to Western ones. When a US satellite passes over Antarctica, it is often in a safe mode, or transmitting data to a ground station in Australia or the US. By sitting underneath it with high-powered receivers, China can potentially intercept the uplink and downlink signals. They can map the electronic signature of the Western Space Fleet. They can potentially jam the control signals, leaving the satellite drifting and useless for critical minutes. This is why the location matters. Inexpressible Island provides a clear view of the southern sky. It is strategically positioned to dominate the Ross Sea sector. This capability turns Antarctica from a scientific sanctuary into a critical node in the kill chain. If China can use Qinling to speed up their satellite data transfer, they can target missiles faster. They can track US fleet movements in real time. It closes the loop on their kill web. The station is ostensibly for oceanography and atmospheric physics. But as we know, the atmosphere is the medium through which missiles fly, and the ocean is the medium through which submarines move. Understanding the density, salinity, and thermal layers of the Southern Ocean is critical for submarine warfare. A Chinese submarine hiding in the deep trenches of the Southern Ocean needs accurate maps. It needs to know how sound propagates in that specific water. Qinling provides that data. It creates a home field advantage in the one ocean where the West thought it was safe. There is a bitter historical irony to the location. Inexpressible Island was named by the Northern Party of Robert Falcon Scott's expedition in 1912. They were stranded there for a winter, surviving in a snow cave, eating seals and penguins, enduring hell on Earth. It is a sacred site of Western exploration heritage. Now it hosts a permanent outpost of the Chinese Communist Party. The construction of Qinling was a feat of logistics that should worry any military planner. China didn't just build it, they prefabricated it. They shipped the entire station in modules and assembled it in weeks. This demonstrates a rapid construction capability in extreme environments. If they can build a 5,000 square meter science base in a few months, they can build a missile silo or a drone runway just as fast. The logistics chain that supplies Qinling, the icebreakers, the cargo ships, is the same logistics chain that would support a military deployment. This dual-use ambiguity is the core of the problem. Under the Antarctic Treaty, military bases are banned. But military personnel are allowed to support scientific missions. And scientific equipment is allowed. Is a radar tracking space debris scientific? Yes. Can it also track a ballistic missile? Yes. Is a wharf for a research icebreaker scientific? Yes. Can it refuel a naval frigate? Yes. Is a laser used for atmospheric measuring scientific? Yes. Can it blind a satellite? Yes. China is exploiting these loopholes to the maximum. They are building infrastructure that is plug and play for war. If a conflict breaks out in the Pacific, Qinling Station becomes a strategic asset. It provides situational awareness. It provides a potential basing option for long-range surveillance drones. It forces the US and Australia to divert assets to watch the South, stretching their forces thinner in the North. Western nations have been slow to react to this. We played by the spirit of the treaty. China played by the letter of the treaty and twisted it. Australia and the US have bases nearby, McMurdo and Scott Base, but they are aging. Their infrastructure is crumbling. Qinling is brand new. It represents the new Antarctica. assertive, modern, and Chinese. The intelligence threat is not theoretical. In 2023, reports surfaced that China was using its Arctic stations for similar purposes. The move to the Antarctic is the closing of the pincer. It gives them global coverage. For Australia, this is a nightmare. Our satellites, our communications, our secrets pass over that station every day. We are being watched from our own backyard. The listening post on Inexpressible Island is a silent sentinel, gathering the data that could one day be used to defeat us. The 2048 deadline. Why is China doing this? Why spend billions to build bases in a frozen wasteland? Why send icebreakers halfway around the world? It isn't just about satellites. It is about what lies beneath the ice. There is a date that is circled in red on the calendars of every resource ministry in Beijing, 2048. This is the year the Madrid Protocol comes up for review. The Madrid Protocol is the addendum to the Antarctic Treaty that bans mining. It declares Antarctica a natural reserve, devoted to peace and science. It prohibits all activity relating to mineral resources, except for scientific research. It is the environmental lock on the treasure chest. Currently, you cannot drill for oil in Antarctica. You cannot mine for gold. You cannot extract the massive deposits of coal and iron or that we know exist in the transantarctic mountains. But in 2048, that ban can be challenged. Any consultative party to the treaty can call for a review. And if the geopolitical winds have shifted, if the world is starving for resources, if the treaty nations are weak, the ban could be overturned. China is playing the long game. They operate on a timeline of decades, not election cycles. They believe that by 2048, the world will be desperate for energy and critical minerals. They believe that the green energy transition will require resources that are running out elsewhere. And Antarctica is the last treasure chest. Geological surveys suggest that the Southern Ocean contains billions of barrels of oil and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas. Specifically, the sedimentary basins in the Ross Sea and the Weddell Sea are believed to be rich in hydrocarbons. The continent itself holds vast reserves of copper, gold, uranium, and the rare earth elements needed for batteries and high-tech weapons: lithium, cobalt, graphite. The greed narrative is simple. The West wants to save the planet. Beijing wants to strip mine it. China puts boots on the ground now so that in 2048 they can say, "We are already here. We have the infrastructure. We have the maps. We have the rights. We have the logistics to extract this." It is a strategy of prepositioning. If you own the wharf, you own the logistics. If you own the map, you own the claim. China refers to this as utilizing foreign resources. They view the Antarctic not as a wilderness to be protected, but as a stockpile to be exploited when the time is right. They frame it as a matter of food and energy security for their 1.4 billion people. This puts them on a collision course with Australia. Australia generally supports the ban on mining. We view the AAT as an environmental asset. But if China decides to drill in the Australian claim, what can we do? Send a frigate to arrest an oil rig? Initiate a naval clash in the ice? That is the scenario that keeps strategists awake. A resource war in the ice. We are already seeing the precursors to this. China is actively pushing for marine protected areas to be blocked. They veto conservation measures in the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CCMLR. They want to keep the fishing grounds open. They are engaging in massive krill fishing operations. Krill is the bottom of the food chain. But it is also a massive protein source and source of oil for supplements. China is harvesting it on an industrial scale. This is the first step. First you take the fish, then you take the oil, then you take the minerals. They are also conducting extensive geological research. They are drilling deep ice cores. They are sounding the seabed. They claim it is for climate science, to understand past CO2 levels. And it is. But that same data tells you where the oil basins are. That same data tells you the mineral composition of the bedrock. It is dual-use science again. The treaty system relies on consensus. China uses its veto power to paralyze the system. They block inspections. They block conservation. They grind the system down until it becomes irrelevant. This is lawfare, using the law to destroy the law. By 2048, China aims to have such a dominant physical presence that the treaty will be a hollow shell. They will present the world with a fait accompli. We are mining. Try and stop us. This is why the Qinling Station matters. It is a flagpole. It asserts presence. Under international law, sovereignty is often determined by effective occupation. By building permanent, year-round bases, China is building a case for effective occupation. They are challenging Australia's 42% claim by squatting on it. And every year that passes, their squatters' rights get stronger. The icebreaker response. So, is Australia sleeping? Is the custodian letting the house be robbed? For a long time the answer was yes. We neglected our Antarctic capabilities. We relied on an aging ship, the Aurora Australis. We let our funding slip. We assumed the treaty would protect us. But the wake-up call has been heard. Canberra is fighting back with the biggest, most expensive, most powerful ship in Australian history. The RSV Nuyina. This isn't just a ship. It is a floating city. It is the Swiss Army knife of the Southern Ocean. It cost nearly 2 billion Australian dollars over its lifetime. It is 160 meters long. It displaces 25,000 tons. It can break ice nearly 2 meters thick while moving at a steady speed. It is one of the most advanced polar research vessels on the planet. The Nuyina is Australia's white-hulled deterrent. It is designed to project sovereignty. It can resupply Australia's 3 continental bases, Casey, Davis, Mawson, and the subantarctic station on Macquarie Island in a single season. It carries helicopters, barges, and amphibious vehicles. It has a moon pool for deploying underwater drones. It allows Australia to be present, to inspect Chinese bases, to patrol the coastline, to say, this is our water. But a ship alone isn't enough. Australia is also ramping up its overland traverse capabilities. We are preparing to drill for a million-year ice core, a project that requires a massive inland convoy deep into the territory. This project is scientific gold, but it is also strategic genius. It puts Australian boots, trucks, and flags deep in the interior in areas China might covet. It asserts effective occupation. It shows we can operate anywhere, anytime. Furthermore, Australia is upgrading the runways. The Wilkins Aerodrome is being utilized to fly C-17 Globemasters directly from Hobart to the ice. This air bridge is a lifeline. In a crisis, it allows Australia to surge personnel and equipment south in hours, not weeks. The final piece of the puzzle is the alliance. Australia is not alone. Hobart, the capital of Tasmania, is being transformed. It is already the home port of the Nuyina. But it is increasingly becoming a port of call for the United States. The U.S. Coast Guard sends its heavy icebreaker, the Polar Star, to Hobart regularly for maintenance and resupply before heading south. The U.S. Navy is looking at the Southern Ocean with renewed interest. This is the geopolitical pincer. The U.S. and Australia are coordinating their Antarctic strategies. They are sharing intelligence on Chinese activities. They are conducting joint inspections. Hobart is becoming the gateway to the south for the Western Alliance. It is the logistical hub that supports the resistance against Chinese expansionism. Along with Christchurch in New Zealand, these cities form the logistical backbone of the Western presence. The strategy is clear: hold the line, reinforce the treaty, shine a light on dual-use activities, and maintain a physical presence that cannot be ignored. The Nuyina is the symbol of this resolve. It is a massive steel fist in a velvet glove of science. It tells Beijing that Australia is an Antarctic superpower, and we intend to stay one. The Cold War has moved to the coldest place on Earth. The winds are howling, the ice is shifting, and the flags are snapping in the gale. Australia has drawn a line in the snow. We are the custodians of this continent. We are the guardians of the last frontier. And we will not let the ice curtain close without a fight. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you think the Antarctic Treaty will survive 2048, or is a resource war inevitable? Let us know in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay realistic, and we'll see you in the next one.